Well, on behalf of MITAC, the MIT Activities Committee, I want to welcome everybody today to the Let's Go Fishing Talk with Jim Legacy from the Mass Wildlife Angler Education Program. And Jim is going to guide us through some of the basics of fishing, the equipment, how to cast, fish identification, rigging your line, and some of the laws and ethics with fishing as well. So without further ado, I'll have Jim take us away to the fantastic world of fishing. So
Thank
Jim.
you. Thank you, Diane, and thank you to the MIT Activities Committee. I appreciate you offering this opportunity. So as Diane said, my name is Jim Legacy. I coordinate the Angler Education Program for the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, or our nickname is Mass Wildlife. That rolls off the tongue a little easier. And what is an angler? An angler is someone that fishes, whether it's male, female, child, another animal that fishes. But in our case, it's humans and people that want to fish and or want to learn how to fish. So we call it the Angler Education Program. The larger goal of that program is to inspire an interest in the outdoors through the experience of fishing. Fishing is just kind of the, pardon the pun, the hook that gets folks interested in the outdoors. And it did for me. I kind of came full circle. I started fishing when I was a youngster and enjoyed it so much. I decided to try and make my life in the outdoors, and I was lucky enough to do so. The larger issue, though, Mass Wildlife really wants people to connect with the outdoors, find their inspiration in nature and in our natural resources. And there's so many ways to do it. And fishing is just one of the easier ways, and is typically what a lot of people do when they're younger. They get taken out by their parents or grandparents or friends, no different for me. And it inspired my interest in the outdoors. So neat to come full circle and be able to teach it. So what I'm going to present to you today, it is a PowerPoint, and it keeps me on kind of a somewhat of a schedule. I've been coordinating this program for over 20 years. So that should give you some idea where I'm coming from. And I've been working for Mass Wildlife for almost 30 years. So with that, we get a lot of the same questions at our events over and over and over. And I put those, like the top questions that we've gotten, and I've weaved them into some tips for you in terms of fishing and starting your fishing journey, whether you're a beginner or someone that's that hasn't done it in a long time. This is you're kind of our target audience here. In the Angler Education Program, most of what we do is focused at beginners or people that have been away for a while, but we also do winter ice fishing programs, fly fishing programs, adult-only fishing programs. We really focus on families. So if you like what you see and you want to come out and learn more hands-on, we'll be sending you some resources after this is over, so you can seek us out and get some hands-on. But this hopefully will give you enough confidence to go out and fish on your own. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint now. The sound is on. We'll click that on. We'll go from the beginning, folks. And we're calling it Let's Go Fishing with the Mass Wildlife Angler Education Program. And again, it's like the top 10 fishing tips I can give you. Some are pretty easy, pretty intuitive, and others a little more complicated. And it's, again, created from all my years doing the program and all the questions that we get over and over and over, which makes sense for new anglers. So the first thing, obviously, with any pastime is to know the rules. I mean, you absolutely have to know the rules, whether you're starting to play golf, tennis, baseball, knitting, crocheting, whatever the pastime. There are rules, and in terms of fishing, there's some regulations involved as well. So we'll walk you through those to start. The biggest thing we hope you take from this is conservation and stewardship. Conservation is just the wise use of the resources so they're there for future generations to use. And generally, when people pick up a pastime, they learn about it and learn to care about it, and that's what we really want. And then stewardship is looking after something, being a good steward. So the wise use and stewardship of our natural resources is critical to Mass Wildlife, and it should be critical to everyone that partakes in it. So we'll look at a little bit of the fish and how to identify them. We'll talk about rules and regulations and whether you need a fishing license, folks. So let's get right into it. Do I need a fishing license, and where can I buy it? Well, yes, you do. If you're 15 years of age and over, in Massachusetts, every state is a little different. So if you're taking a vacation or you're watching this from another state, check out your state Fish and Wildlife regulations. So under 15, no license needed. Still have to abide by those regulations we'll talk about. 15 to 17, it's free. Have to possess it, but it's free. 18 up to 64. You're in the meat of the license buying years, and the current cost is $27.50. And then 65 to 69 is discounted, and 70 and beyond, it's free. We still need you to have the license. A lot of people ask, well, why do I even need it if it's free? Well, we like to know who's fishing. We like to know our demographics. So by you having that license, then we know you're still partaking and you're still out there and active. And non-residents, it's $37.50 right now. Saltwater fishing is no different. They call it a permit, but it's essentially a license. And that's been in ongoing for about 10 years now. A lot of people are still unaware that you need a saltwater license to fish, and they do it a little different. They're 16 and above, and it's just $10. It's based on a calendar year. 60 plus, it's free. Still need to have it, but it's free. And again, all of them are based on a calendar year. Where can you purchase them? The best place is right where you are now, sitting at in the comfort of your home or office, or in front of your phone or tablet. Just go to our site, and I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of our site. Just go to our site, and you can easily purchase it within about 5 minutes. If you're a new customer, if you're a returning customer, probably in 2 or 3 minutes, and then you can just print it out or screenshot it on your device. So, and by the way, the fees that we get from fishing licenses and hunting licenses, and there's a handful of trappers still left in Massachusetts, those fees, we are a dedicated funding agency, so that's most of where we get our funds. So if you care about fish and wildlife in Massachusetts, and most of the fish and wildlife in Massachusetts you don't hunt and fish for, we have a huge team that manages all of our endangered species and threatened habitats. So that money goes to those too. So even if you don't fish or hunt, you just want to make a donation to us, a good donation would be just buy a fishing license. And that money goes into the larger pool, and it manages all fish and wildlife resources throughout Massachusetts. Little known fact too, if you do like to fish or hunt, there's an excise tax put on your fishing rod, on a lure that you would buy, and that money goes to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who partitions it to all the states. And that money comes to us to manage fish and wildlife as well. So it's a user pay, user benefit system. So we don't really get general tax revenues. We're a dedicated funding stream. So if you care about fish and wildlife in Mass, not a bad idea to jump in and buy a fishing license and go fishing. So do I need a license to take my child or grandchild fishing? We get this question all the time, and it's kind of a yes, no, like so much in fishing. I would just say that it's definitely best to have, just in case you end up wanting to go fishing. And again, I just explained where that money goes. So it's a great donation, your state Fish and Wildlife Agency, whatever state you live in, because they're all set up pretty much like that. It's called the North American Wildlife Model. So it's best to have just in case. But here's the deal. You do need it if you're in control of the rod and reel. So if you're casting or reeling it in, you're basically fishing. You do not need it if you're just helping them put the bait on, take the fish off the hook, untangle their line. You could probably even get away with, if they're casting, you're just kind of assisting them in your cast. But if you grab the rod out of their hand and now you're fishing, well, then technically you need the license. That's kind of where the law is set up. You don't need the license to help, but you need it if you're physically fishing yourself. Are there size limits and or catch limits? So the amount of fish you can keep per day, and how big they need to be? The answer is absolutely yes. We're fortunate in Massachusetts in that we're not heavy on regulations. You can pretty much find a water body to fish 24/7, 365, as they say. There's not a lot of open and closed seasons. There used to be back in the 70s. There used to be a hard opening. Back when I was younger, it was usually like, I think, the third Saturday in April, and then it would be a closed season, so through the winter. But now it's open all the time. There are water bodies, drinking water supplies, in particular larger ones like the Quabbin Reservoir, Wachusett reservoirs, that do have opening and closed seasons. So keep mindful of that. But most water bodies in Mass, ponds, lakes, streams, and rivers are open all year long. So certain states, just be warned, like if you go to Maine, you go to some of the bigger states out west, they do manage by region or even by pond or lake or watersheds. So groups of water bodies. So you have to have their regulations so you know where to go. Don't just assume it's like Massachusetts. We're fairly flexible and we don't feel the need to manage down to each individual water body. So with that said, though, there are still regulations here in this state, no different. There's certain fish that you can only keep a certain amount of per day, and they have to be a certain size. No different in saltwater either. I don't have the saltwater regs. We're going to focus on freshwater today, but our sister agency and good friends, the Division of Marine Fisheries, oversees that resource. And the best way to find all about us and them and our other sister agencies is just to do a quick online search. You can find Mass Wildlife by just Googling Mass Wildlife, and it's the first website that'll come up. And the Division of Marine Fisheries, Mass Marine Fisheries, will be no different. And you can easily navigate the page and find the regulations, the fish. Say you want to fish for striped bass in the saltwater, you have to find out how many you can keep and what size. If you're interested in keeping fish. So just know that. We'll just walk through a few quick examples of fish that have regulations applied to them. And these are generally, not always, but generally the larger, what people associate as good eating game fish species. So the basses, the pike, the pickerel, the trout, salmon, those fish that there's less of. They're larger apex predators, and biologists feel, and ours are no different, that there is a need to regulate those with minimum size limits and maximum amounts that you can keep on a daily basis. So this comes with your license. You have to have your license if you're a certain age, and you have to abide by these regulations if you're a caring, concerned citizen in terms of fishing. So few examples of the basses, like I say, the trouts that are very popular, salmon too, and these big long toothy fish. Some of the biggest fish we have in the state would be the northern pike and tiger muskellunge, and even the smaller cousins, the chain pickerel. So just pick largemouth bass, a very popular fish to go after. You can keep 5 per day, and they have to be a minimum of 12 inches. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we're going, and about eating them and why that's a good idea or a bad idea if you're a certain demographic. We keep and maintain a modern fish culture facilities throughout the state. These are fish hatcheries, we call them. So we raise a little over 500,000 brook brown rainbow trout that we sprinkle throughout the state in the spring and a little bit in the fall, with the idea that it gets people interested in fishing. It gives them a reason to get out there. These fish are delicious to eat. They're some of the safer fish to eat because we raise them to mature sizes in short periods of time. And I'll talk about fish eating as we go along. But so those are the fish that we mostly have limits on, and the fish that there aren't limits on currently, but always consult a current copy of the Massachusetts Fish and Wildlife Guide, would be this mostly what you associate with the more prolific, smaller fish. So smaller members of the bass family would be pumpkin seeds and bluegills and calico bass or black crappie, the perches, some of the catfish. And these aren't always small. Some catfish can get ginormous, as they say. And of course, eels can get big. So they aren't always small, but they are more prolific. They're less sought after too. So there's that whole demand, supply and demand, and they're not as in demand. Maybe it's palatability. People don't like to eat them as much as trout and some of the other larger species. So currently, we see no reason to regulate these. So there's no limits per day and there's no minimum size. Having said that, though, I would still recommend that you get them to an edible size. And an edible size, everyone's a little different about that. To me, take, for instance, our native sunfish, pumpkin seed, or a yellow perch. And these are a different family of fish, but they're lumped as panfish because they taste good coming out of the pan. And they really do. They're delicious fish if you like to eat freshwater fish. But I'd say these have to be at least, 10 inches. For me, a perch would have to be a good 12 inches. That's when it's going to be worth it to take them home and eat them. There's going to be a good chunk of meat. And a lot of times I'll see people filling buckets with little tiny fish. And I think you still have to have a balance, even if there's no minimum size here. You probably should have some, and that's where ethics come in, some ethics, some sense of it, to make it worth your while and to keep these fish in our waters, because these fish are all part of the food chain within that water body or watershed. So they coexist with the other species within that, and you don't want to knock them way out of balance by going in there with buckets and just cleaning out the pond of all fish. So just kind of keep that in mind too. The ethics come into play. Here's a question I get a lot. Can you catch a wild fish and bring it home and put it in your fish tank or private pond? I usually get that from the little ones because they love to touch the fish and they want to bring it home. And the answer to that is, whoop, I skipped right over it. I don't want you to know that, right? I'm going to have to go back. Is a resounding no. it's absolutely against the law. The only two legal reasons to keep wild fish are to eat them, as I already mentioned, and or to have it preserved by a fish artist, otherwise known as a taxidermist. I won't go into that entire process. Suffice it to say that if you catch a very large fish that you deem as a trophy, you'll want to seek a fish artist out to, you may want to seek a fish artist out to have that fish preserved so you can hang it on the wall to collect dust if that's your thing. Some people like their home offices adorned with what they like to do, and fish are one of those things they like to put on the wall. Keep in mind, it's very expensive to do. You know, a mounted fish could be anywhere from $200-300 up to $1,000 or more, depending on the species and the size. So, but those are two legal reasons to keep a fish. Both of those have in common that it's illegal to move a live fish from that water body. So if you're going to take it home and eat it, it should be euthanized before you leave the water body, even if you are going to take it to a fish artist. And these transport laws were put into place to prevent disease, infection, unwanted species in one water body to the next. One only needs to look at a few large examples in North America to see why this is a bad idea. Asian carp in the Mississippi drainage, round gobies in the Lake Ontario system, northern snakeheads in the Potomac River. These are species that don't have any natural predators, were put in illegally, and then just go, they just go unchecked, and they have at it. The grass carp, particularly in the Mississippi drainage, is particularly bad. That was actually a unintentional introduction. Fish and Wildlife folks brought those in over 100 years ago to try and control one thing, and they got out. Of course they got out, typically do, and they're in the Mississippi now in a lot of tributaries, and they're the ones you see. If you Google them, you'd see, and you sometimes hear about them on the news because they're jumpers, and they really respond to vibration in the water column. All fish do, but these guys really respond to it. So the boat, you'll be passing, ripping down the water in your boat, and the fish will jump out and hit you or jump into the boat, and they've actually hurt and injured people. They're very large fish like carp get, and they can do a lot of damage, and they've done a lot of damage to native fishes in those waters. So those are bigger, literally demonstrative examples of why it's not a good idea to move one fish, live fish, from one water body or another. So, and that's a black and white regulation, folks. So that's an absolutely not. So tip number 2 is pick a great location to fish, and that's not hard to do. And I'll give you a quick walkthrough in a moment of our website to how to find a great location. Picking a great location is easy. In New England, in particular, anywhere in New England, we are just overrun with incredible water resources left from the last glacial event some 10 to 12,000 years ago. They scoured, and they left a lot of pothole water bodies, a lot of deep 2-story lakes, a lot of smaller water bodies, scoured some rivers and streams, and they just gave us a tremendous amount of resources with which to fish in. So that's not hard. The water body you drive by on the way to work, school, on a jog, on a bike ride, you will undoubtedly pass a water body, and undoubtedly it's open to fishing. Make sure first, though, there are some water bodies that are closed if they're lake association, private ponds, or drinking water supplies, but probably 90+% of them are wide open to fishing. And people, even tiny little ones, people say, oh my God, can't be any fish in there. There's no fish in there. What are you, crazy? Believe me, there's usually fish in there, and some pretty impressive fish. This little pond here in Forest Park in Springfield, where we run programs yearly, isn't much bigger than what you see here. It kind of goes around the corner a little, but it's very, very tiny and holds some impressive fish. And people drive by it and wouldn't think that at all. And there's so many examples of that throughout the state. Just make sure it is indeed open to fishing if you go, but don't overlook those smaller resources. So with that, I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough. I'm going to stop this share, and I'm going to jump on our website and give you a brief overview of some resources there for you. Whenever you're thinking about going fishing in any state, say you're going to take a trip to Montana or California or New Mexico or Maine or Florida, you would always want to go to that state Fish and Wildlife website first, because they generally have these same resources that I'm going to show you. So ours is no different. You just kind of do a quick Google of Mass Wildlife. This is the first website that's going to pop up. We have 5 big tabs: seasonal announcements, and that's where you're going to find a lot of our events. Fish and wildlife events, a lot of educational events. This is where you're going to learn about wildlife. This is where you're going to buy your fishing or hunting license. This is where you're going to learn about hunting, and this is where you're going to learn about fishing. So I'll just click on that quick, scroll down, and give you a quick overview the most important part, and that's where to go fishing, where to find a resource near you. And it's called the Go Fish Mass digital map. And we're always adding to this. Yearly, we're adding water bodies to it, and our biologists are out sampling and doing the research on it to add it to this list. So currently this is what you have. Say you're viewing us today in the Boston area, so you can kind of skip down here and then start looking at some of the water bodies. I click on this one, and it's Spy Pond in Arlington, and I could just click this little link here, hit the pond map, and then that's an older pond map, a little more primitive one, but it gives you access areas, it gives you the depth, it talks about what's in it when it was last sampled. I'll drop this one down, and we will go look at another one. Hopefully, oh, I plumbed us right out of there. I'm a little too fast with my fingers today, I think. So we'll just kind of leap back toward it. But this is a wonderful resource to have right at your fingertips, folks. Let me see, which water body is this one. It's the Charles River. Let me find maybe another lake that we can look at. Lake Achichuet in Framingham and Natick. Let's look at the pond map for that one. That's a more modern water body with modern bathymetry. Bathymetry, folks, is just underwater depth marks, so you can see how deep the water is, and that's critical if you're fishing throughout the season. So say you're fishing in the middle of the summer right now for trout are cold water fish. And how would you know that? Well, you can do a little research on how to fish for trout, and that's one of the first things. And we have some of that information on our website. Trout like cold water. Cold water holds more oxygen, and they tend to need more dissolved oxygen to survive. So they would, this time of year, they would be down in the deeper water. So it's good to know where that deeper water is. Some of it you can cast from this area here. You can cast right out and get into that deeper water. Some you'd have to take a kayak or canoe or boat to. So you can just kind of move this up and down to see the different basins in Lake Achichuet and the depth markings. If you're fishing for warm water fish, you're going to be like bass and pumpkin seed bluegills. Those sunfish, you're going to want to be in the more shallow sections of the water body. And this will really help you. And then of course we also have the information, the general information about it, the access to it, fish populations in it, and the general overview of the fishing. So this is really where you want to come if you're looking for a place to go fishing, folks. You don't want to overlook the Go Fish Mass map. And again, in all states are going to have this. We're adding to it all the time. We're making it more modern. And you can even, if you're into ice fishing in the winter, you can literally have your device, your phone, and walk right out on the pond and see yourself walking out by using these maps. So you know exactly what depth you're over when you're fishing. So it's a neat little resource. Other resources here are Freshwater Fishing for Beginners, which is where you're at now. And there's a lot of good resources there. Our trout stock report. So we stock trout, again, about 500,000 in the spring and 50 or 60,000 in the fall. So starting in March through about Memorial Day, and then sometime mid to late September into early October, depending on water temperatures. And this will give you a quick report. You can punch in the town you live in, see if we stocked in that town. You can do it by water body. Say you're going to go to the Berkshires and fish Lake Onoda. You can do a search on there, and you can see exactly when we stocked it, the date, and what we put in for species. So neat little resource to find out, to give you the heads up. And then there's best bets for all the different larger species, all the different species of fish that we talked about. So those are just kind of a quick run through. I can talk about that a lot more, but we need to get back to the PowerPoint because I've got a lot more detailed information. But before you go fishing, if you don't know where to go, definitely start there, the Go Fish Mass map on our website. And then if you're looking for all kinds of print resources you can download and or print off, our website is the source for all things fish and wildlife. Not just our website, but ours is a good one to start with. So once you determine what water body to go fish, you want to be able to find the fish. In fish, there's an old adage in real estate: what sells is location, location, location. Well, in fishing, it's structure, structure, structure. So in other words, something that's going to hold the fish. It is location too, obviously location driven. You wouldn't want to walk out onto a barren beach without any plants or any trees down or anything and just start casting. Occasionally fish will swim through there, especially the schooling fish that are moving, looking for something to eat. But you really want to look for areas that are going to hold fish. They have habitat requirements just like we do. They have their own homes, so to speak. So this fish was taken last year calico bass in a little pond near me, and I took it right out of these thick lily pads, just kind of laying in wait right in there. Largemouth bass like this loves these tangled tree roots. It's going to be down in a Ford cover, so they can lie in wait and swim around, look for something to eat. And trout, this is a beautiful brook trout, one of the prettiest species we have in Massachusetts, laying under the undercut bank and a stream in all the rocks. And again, somewhere to hide, somewhere to lay in wait for that meal to come by. Fish are, it's all about energy in, energy out. They don't want to spend any more than they take in. It's kind of critical for their survival. Well, they can't just jump in the car and go to the grocery store. They have to rely on what's in their habitat, so they don't want to waste energy. And you'll see this a lot when you fish. In fact, if you're offering a very small offering for like pumpkin seed and bluegill, and why am I not catching bigger fish? Well, the bigger fish might be down looking at that going, I'm not swimming up for that. It's too small. You give me a fish to go after, like a larger, like if you put, and I'll show you different baits. If you give me a larger fish, I'll swim up and go after it, because I got to spend a lot of energy to swim the 8 or 10 feet up to grab that. So it's all about energy in, energy out, and they're in their habitats, they're in their homes waiting for that to happen. So find your location, find the fish within that location. That's going to be a downed or submerged trees, large rocks and boulders, overhanging bushes and trees in the water, undercut stream banks like this, weedy areas along the shoreline, and deep water habitat. For trout this time of year in the summer, they're in deep water. That counts as structure for them. They're down where the water's cooler, and they'll come up like early in the morning or late in the day. They're more of a daytime active fish. When the water temp's cooler, the sun is lower on the horizon, and they'll seek out their meals then, and then they'll go down deeper and stay away from the heat of the day. So that was tip number 2, find a good location. Tip number 3 is get the right equipment. However tempting it might be to use, grandpa's or grandma's rod and reel, or mom and dad's rod and reel that could have been sitting in a closet for the last 30 years, and the line is all brittle and, worn out, probably not the best one to start with. It's only going to frustrate you. I always give this example, and it just and I'll give it in a second. It ties in better with another slide of why it's good to have the right equipment. But for this little fella, it was just a simple, tiny little 3-foot push button rod and reel set up with a bobber, which you see here. And I'm going to show you a little more detail about this rig after, in a hook. And voila, nice big fat bluegill. And in terms of an eating size bluegill, this would probably be, it's probably about 10 inches long and really fat if you want to make a meal out of that, but at least that bigger like we talked about. So for young ones in this age demographic, the push button spin casting rod and reel will show you very light, short little rod, because they're going to be swinging it all over, trying to get their line out, and the shorter one's probably better for them. So the best rod and reels for beginners, folks, it's going to be, like I just said, the push button spin cast and the spinning rod and reel. Those are by far the 2 that are simple and easy to start with. Most people you'll see, especially young folks, will start with the push button one. They call it push button, and I'll show you why in a second. It's really because it's big fat button on the back. And or the spinning. The spinning is a little more complicated. The line is less contained, so it makes it a little more frustrating. But if grandma or grandpa gave you this or this, and you have never fished before, and you know it to be a bait casting rod and reel, and there's certain signs that you can tell it's a bait casting rod and reel. It's a push button rod and reel with an open spool. There's a little more difficult to wield and use. And then the fly rod, it's usually a really long rod and reel with just a reel that holds the line that sits underneath it. It looks very simple by comparison to this one or this one. These are a little more engineered, and things that are more engineered are a little easier to use. So begin with these. And why? I'll give you that analogy. There was a movie that came out in the early 90s. I think it was 92 or 93, called The River Runs Through It. Beautiful movie about a struggle between 2 brothers and a father that was a minister. So it had a nice moral, larger story behind it. But they bonded as a family over fly fishing out in, of course, one of the most beautiful places in North America, Montana. On these gorgeous rivers in Montana, and they were fly fishing. So, which is for some people the most romantic way to fish, because it just looks beautiful, and how the line is cast out and laid into the water, and they show these beautiful fish. Trout are some of the prettiest fish to catch. So people that never fish watch this movie because of the actors and the setting. Brad Pitt, one of Brad Pitt's first movies. So why wouldn't you watch it, right? So they watched this movie and they fell in love with that idea of fishing, and they'd never fished before. So they went out and bought themselves the kind of rod and reels that were used in those movies called fly rods, and just went out in droves and tried to fly fish and had never fished before. So they got very frustrated. The fly fishing industry absolutely loved it because it was a huge uptick in sales of fly rods, but that's not the kind of rod and reel you'd want to start with. It takes a little bit more confidence and skill to use it, and a little more patience to get the line out into the water. So you don't want to start driving by driving a Porsche, a stick shift Porsche with 500 horsepower. You want to ease into it. You got to walk before you can run, kind of thing. So I always tell that story just to kind of illustrate the point. You really want to start with the basic stuff. It's not going to cost much to see first if you like the pastime. So once you have your rod and reel, and we'll show you how to cast that in a second, you want to get the basic for tackle. If you're just starting out, I'd recommend just getting a package of hooks and something to tell if you have a fish on the end of the line. And that would be a float or a bobber, otherwise known as a strike indicator. They even use them in fly fishing to tell you if you have a fish biting. And that's so critical to know if a fish is biting if you've never fished. If you see this bouncing up and down the water, going under the water, you have a fish. And that's when you have to either start reeling it in or setting the hook, depending on what type of hook you're using. And circle hooks are the ones we recommend. Circle hooks are super easy to use. Excuse me, you don't need to do that demonstrative big old hook set that a lot of people are fond of. If you're just starting, it's much easier once you recognize that you're getting a bite, just to slowly start turning the handle of the reel. And the hook does a lot of the work for you. It's designed such that the hook is the point is bent way back, and it makes it easier to catch the fish, usually just the upper or lower jaw, and not down deeper in their mouth. That's what the whole idea of that design is, to do less damage to fish if you choose to put them back. And a lot of people just catch and release fish for fun. So the standard style of hook is called the J hook, and there's so many different varieties of the J hook, but we always recommend the circle hook now. And we also recommend taking off the second point. You're going to see with a basic hook anatomy, you have a front point, and then what they call the barb. It's a point that's bending in the other, it's pointed in the other direction. Right here, that if you're practicing catch and keep, you're fishing for dinner, and you know what you're doing, you may not want to take this off. But if you're just catching fish for fun, if you're brand new, always a good idea to pinch this barb down. You can just take a pair of pliers and snap it right down, and take a file or file it off. Better if you're fishing with young kids too, because if they were to get the point of the hook in them, which will give them a major owie, it'll also come right out, because that point isn't going to hold the hook under the flesh. It's going to just come right out. You give it a kiss, put a Band-Aid on it, and they're on their way. But if this is under their skin, that second point, it can be a little cause for concern. If you don't know how to remove that, you might have to go to urgent care, emergency room, and they'll give someone, whoever has the unfortunate incident, a little Novocaine, and they'll pull it right out and disinfect it. It's not a huge deal. In all my years of coordinating this program with tens of thousands of people, it's only happened a handful of times. So most people do, spread out when they're fishing. Fishing is the original social distance activity because of the swinging hooks and the people's interest in being solitary when they're out there. So just be that as it may, spread out, be very wary of your swinging hook, and that won't happen. But if it does happen with a barbless hook, particularly a circle hook, the hook generally comes right out. And it's not a problem. And it also comes right out of the fish, which is great too if you're practicing catch and release. These other little items here, weights and sinkers, are great to put on the end of the line, particularly if you're fishing off the bottom. But even if you're fishing with a bobber rig, you can put a little weight, and these bobbers have already got them kind of attached to them. You can buy some bobbers with the weight on them, and it gives you a little more distance in your cast, particularly if there's a wind in your face. If there's no wind, it isn't going to help that much. I'd recommend leaving your rig clean of that. Swivels are neat little things you tie to the terminal end of your setup, the end of your line, and they're used mostly if you're lure fishing. And I'll talk about lures in a little bit. They keep the twist out of your line, so really good thing to have. But if you just live bait fishing, you don't need them. And a neat little known fact about hooks is the larger the number, the smaller the hook, and the smaller the number, the bigger the hook. So it's a weird inverse. I don't know who came up with it. Maybe Isaac Walton 500 years ago. I'm not sure, but it is something that people get confused at. So a number, look at this thing here, number 13 or a 12 hook you would think, oh, that's a big number in terms of all the different, from 1 to that number, right? But that's actually the smaller of the hooks. So if you get down to 1 and even below 0, below the 0, like 1/0, 2/0, 3/0, the hooks get bigger and bigger and bigger, generally which you'd use for very large fish or fishing in salt water. So just kind of keep that in mind. General hook size for beginners would be a 6 or an 8, right in that range. No real bigger than a 4 and no bigger than a 10. I always recommend about a 6 or an 8 for pan fishing, for just about anything that would bite. So tip number 4 is kind of give it a whirl at home before you go out, folks. So that we'd be practicing your casting, tying a couple of fishing knots, kind of rigging up before you go out. You don't want to be fumbling around at the water. You want to be fishing at the water. When we do programs, all of our rigs are ready to go. We teach casting. We make sure everyone knows how to cast before they fish, knows how to, and then we even teach them how to put the bait on and everything, even though that kind of breaks up after a while. We're usually running around putting the bait on for most people, but we teach them beforehand, then they go out to the water and they're ready to go. No different than if you're home with your family, just kind of, and kiddos love to make a game out of this, practice casting in a bucket or a hula hoop, or these little fish you can buy that they can actually literally catch on their lawns or driveways at home. So easy thing to do. Okay, so learning to cast, and we're going to focus on the 2 basic kinds. We do some advanced fishing at some of our fishing festivals. We'll have the other 2 that I showed you earlier, and we'll have people showing. And we do some fly fishing programs too. But today we're talking basics. So you're going to talk the spin casting rod and reel and the spinning rod and reel. These are the correct ways to hold them. I see this all the time. I see them upside down and backwards. The ones with the green check marks, this is how you hold it. The push button, you want your thumb to be operating that button. You want the reel to sit on top of the rod, not upside down and backwards like this. And the spinning rod, just the opposite. You want it underneath the rod, not on top of. Everything is backwards if you do it this way. So I see people doing that. Sometimes I even friendly just walk up to them and at events and try to correct them. And they've been doing it that way so long, sometimes they're not even at our events to learn. They bring their kids or grandkids, so they know how to do it. They're just used to it that way, and I say that's fine. If you get used to it that way, it's, if you can fish left-handed with a right-handed rod and reel setup, and vice versa. As long as you're out there fishing, having a good time, and you know how to do it that way. But if you learn from the beginning, it's a lot easier if you start with the kind of the right way to do it. All right. So this is going to give you a quick walkthrough of how to cast a push button or a spin casting rod and reel, the kind I recommend for everyone if they're just starting out. And believe me, a lot of adults use these. It's not just a kid's rods, even though the kids' rods all are like this, but you can get them in 6, 7, 8 foot combinations for saltwater fishing. Even tournament bass professionals have been known to use them because of their simplicity and they don't tangle up that much. My wife, who fishes with me still occasionally, will insist on using the push button because it's just that easy, and it'll catch just as many and as big fish as you can catch with any other rod and reel type. So let's take a look at this. Whoop, skipped right over it again, folks. Whoa, I'm sorry. I gotta push the play button.
Jim Legacy, Mass Wildlife's Angler Education Coordinator, and today we're going to give you a quick introduction to the push-button spin casting rod and reel, the most engineered reel, and anything more engineered is typically easier to use, and this is no exception. The reel is meant to sit on top of the rod. There are people I see all the time using it kind of backwards. They're using their forefingers to depress it, and they're reeling it in backwards. It's designed to sit on top of the rod, using your thumb to depress the button, and then reeling it forward. So very, very simple. The magic is in this button, when to depress it and when to let go. So you're going to face the water. You're going to depress the button while you're pointing the rod tip toward your target. You're going to bring the rod back just a little ways. You don't have to go all the way back into the trees. Just a little ways beyond your shoulder, and you're going to come forward fast. And when you come forward fast, you're going to lift your thumb up when you're pointing to the sky after you brought it beyond your shoulder. So like so. Just like that. So really, really basic, and it's just getting that rhythm down, when to let go of the button. And if you let go a little soon, your bait's going to go up in the air. If you let go a little late, it's going to go right down in front of you. So it's that sweet spot kind of in the middle, and that just comes with a little practice. It's a really nice, user-friendly rod and reel, and they're very inexpensive, great for beginners, and some people never leave them. They keep fishing with them all their lives.
All right, so there you have it. Very simple. The spinning, the other one I showed you is just, again, the line is less contained. So it's a little more frustrating for beginners, and it's a little more prone to tangles. especially if you didn't stretch the line out and prep it a little bit. And there's a million, YouTube's your friend in terms of fishing, as we all know. If you didn't kind of check out some videos on how to cast and prep your line before you go out. And by prepping, I just mean if it's been in storage for a while or it's brand new off the shelf, you should stretch it. And that's just walking a bunch of line out, maybe 100 feet, giving it a good stretch. You could even soak it in just, warm, tepid water overnight, and it'll soften that monofilament line up a little bit. Fishing line is typically monofilament. It's a single strand. It's a plastic. Sadly, that's one of its weaknesses. But its other weakness is it's got memory. It wants to be where it was, where it just was. So when you go to cast it, if you don't have a mechanism to contain it, like the push button reel does, the spinning, it can kind of bird's nest, we call it, or just get into a big tangle as soon as it comes off the reel. So if you take that stretch out of it, take that tangle out, give it a good stretch before you use it, it'll cast a lot more smooth. And people that know that, it's fine, and they don't have a problem with that. But for newbies, that's why I always recommend the push button, because it will contain that line a heck of a lot better. So once you've gotten your rod and reel and you've learned how to cast, you should learn to tie a fishing knot or two. And there's no shortage of fishing knots out there, folks. There's books about them and all kinds of knots. Animated Knots is probably your source. And if you Google fishing knots, that's probably one of the first websites that's going to come up. And it's a wonderful resource to all knots, all things knots. Little knot terminology that you're going to hear when they're talking about, especially YouTubers are showing you how to tie knots. Tag end is the end of the line that usually passes through the eye of the hook. The standing line, or what they refer to as the running line, goes back to the reel. So you're putting the tag end through the eye of the hook, and then you're tying some sort of knot. Clinch knot is one of the best and easiest ones that we usually use. Proof clinch knot is just one more step. You put it through that loop and then come back, put it through the big loop. Unnecessary for most fishing. So I just stick with the clinch knot. And then the Palomar knot's a real easy one too. And it's usually what I recommend for lures if you're not using a swivel that I showed you before. So learn a knot. Again, practice at home, practice casting, learn to tie a knot or two. The overhand knot, the kind that you use to tie your shoes up, is not a really good knot to use when fishing. Decent sized fish will pull right through that or break it off. So use the right bait is another big tip. Live bait always beats everything else, folks. And why is that? Well, here's why. Fish live in the natural world. In the natural world, they eat their meals alive 90% of the time. So they're looking for that worm in the water, that aquatic insect that's going to hatch, or that aquatic insect struggling to hatch, or that mouse that's swimming across the lake, or that small little duckling, that newborn duckling. A big bass will come up and eat that, or a baby, smaller fish, even something that's alive in the water struggling, really incites that strike response. So live bait usually moves and has smells and textures that the fish know and crave. So it's going to work better. However, and I stress this, if the thought of putting something alive on your hook grosses you out completely, I get it. We use mealworms. I'll show you the 3 things we typically use. But I wouldn't not fish because of it. There's so many other alternatives. Dense pieces of food items like chicken and cheese. Hot dogs work really well because the skin will hold it on the hook. Cheese sticks, you can kind of slice them up and put them on the hook. Just be careful with your cast when you're using food items, because you can, a lot of times if you cast too hard, that food item will fly right off and the fish will just eat it and won't be on your hook. So just be a little gentle with that. Chicken works really good, cooked or uncooked. I've had good luck with all 3 of those. When I've run out of bait and been camping, hot dogs work really well. So if you don't like to touch something alive, wiggling around, and I completely get it. If there's any karma in this world, I'll probably come back as bait or a fish for the thousands of pieces of bait I've put on hooks in my lifetime. I get it. So don't let that stop you from fishing. Food is a wonderful second resource. And then there's lures. Lures are great too. I'd caution you about lures. They're meant to catch anglers as much as fish. You'd go into that store and see the whole wall of lures and scratch your head and wonder, gosh, which one looks good? Well, they all look good to me, so I'm just going to go and buy that one. And that doesn't work. So if you're going to lure fish, Google the species that you're going after. Say you want to target rainbow trout or largemouth bass or northern pike or walleye or perch. Just Google, obviously, the 10 best lures for those, and they'll have the current ones, the one that works best by tried and true anglers. So that hones it down to a few, because lures are expensive and confusing. So that's kind of my big tip on lures. So hooking live baits, these are the big 3 that we use. We mostly use mealworms. Little known fact about earthworms is there wasn't an earthworm on the North American continent before folks came from Europe a few hundred years ago now. So it's introduced, all of the species of worms are introduced, and people say, oh my God, I didn't know that. And aren't they good for your yard and compost? Well, yeah, they are. They do aerate the lawn, and they're great in the compost pile, but they're also quite invasive to certain fragile forest soils. So we want to be careful about just taking your used bait and tossing it up in the woods after. It's far better to put it either back in the yard where you got it, or in the pond for the fish to just eat, because they can still do damage to soils that haven't been inundated with worms. Mealworms are a lot more natural. They're, as far as I know, they're around the globe. They call them mealworms because a lot of times when you open up that bag of flour or cornmeal that you haven't used in a couple of years, it's kind of gross, but the eggs are already in it and will eventually hatch out. They're so small you wouldn't even know they're in it. Will hatch out and you'll have a mealworm growing in there. They're wonderful food for reptiles, amphibians, your pet birds. You can get them in pet stores, but fish also love them. I confess that worms will probably outfish them because worms are just bigger and stinkier and gooier, and they appeal to fish more than mealworms, but mealworms work really good. They're a lot cheaper and a lot easier to keep alive for long periods of time. So that's my go-to. And then there's shiners. They're usually golden shiners that you get in the bait and tackle shop, a native species, otherwise known as pond shiners. Just make sure they are. There's a handful of fish that are legal to use for bait, and that's right in our rules and regulations page you can find on our website. But most of the time, if you trap them yourselves or buy them in a bait and tackle shop, it's going to be these golden shiners. And these are two ways to rig them up on your hook. I prefer the under the dorsal fin above the spine so they can swim freely and still breathe. You hook them in the mouth. That gives them more of a wounded appearance, which some anglers like, but they don't last as long on the hook because they more or less suffocate because they can't open their mouth as well. So I put them on this way, and you can catch a lot of bigger fish because fish, as they get bigger, are looking for smaller fish to eat. Simple live bait rig then, right? Your rod laying on the shore here. First thing you're going to see is a bobber, your strike indicator. And then if it's windy or you want a little more castability, you put a little tiny non-lead split shot weight here. We've gone to non-lead years ago, and it's anything under 1 ounce in Massachusetts has to be non-lead. That protects certain waterfowl, particularly loons. And then you're going to go down, you're going to follow the line down here. You don't see it entirely. It's kind of off the frame to your hook, and then you have your worm on. And this is 2 or 3 feet hanging off. That's why you always have to be careful when you cast. You have all that line swinging. And I don't recommend you actually putting it on this way, just one little loop, because the fish are just going to take it and rip it right off here and not get the hook. I'd recommend actually sewing it on in a bunch, or just breaking it into little pieces and putting it on. Then you'll actually catch the fish when they bite it. Tip number 6, bring the right accessories. With every pastime, you need to accessorize. Fishing is no different. You don't need much. You can go crazy. You can buy your boats. You can buy your kayaks, canoes, waders, all kinds of big tackle boxes with hundreds of dollars of lures, but you don't need a lot to get going. So here's the basic accessories you really should have. So you should always have some polarized sunglasses. Cuts the glare down from the sun, allows you to see the fish swimming better, protects your eyes from swinging hooks and the ill effects, the bad effects of the sun. So those are kind of the big reasons, and they're not expensive. You can spend $200 on a pair of polarized sunglasses. I would never. I buy mine in the cheapest place I can find them for $5 or $10 because I'm abusive to my glasses. Whether it's reading glasses or sunglasses, I sit on them, I toss them around, and they don't take good care of them. Maybe I would if they were $200, but invariably I'd probably sit on them anyway. So you'll find the $10 pair work pretty darn good. And it's going to allow you to see into that water column because it cuts the glare down. You're going to see the fish swimming around. It's going to protect your eyes. So start with there. Start with a way to clip your line, fingernail, toenail clippers. Start with a way to get the fish off the hook. You will a lot of times just be able to pull the fish right off the hook by holding the fish in one hand. I'll show you that in a minute, and taking the hook out. But a lot of times they will have swallowed that hook or got it down deeper in their throat. So then you're going to need some way to get it out. Forceps are really good. You can get these at any drugstore, CVS, Rite Aid, Walgreens. You can buy forceps. The really fancy ones you get in the hospital are really long, like this one, and have the locking mechanism. But any needle nose plier, small forceps are going to work really good. And then you can get really fancy and buy these, but you don't need to. PFD, especially if you're fishing out of a watercraft, canoe and kayak and boat, I'd always recommend wearing it regardless of the time of year. it's the law from September 15th to May 15th. If you're a canoe or kayak, you absolutely have to have it on. And that's because of the water temperature and the potential for hypothermia. And if you get hypothermia when you're flailing around in the water, that could be really bad. And the PFD, personal flotation device, or life jacket, is going to keep you afloat, keep you up, and allow you to get to shore quicker and safer, especially when the water's cold. But even in the summer, I would, at the very least, if you're in a canoe or kayak or boat, sit on it, have it right at arm's reach. And of course, with the prevalence of West Nile and Eastern equine encephalitis, Tripoli, you're going to want to have some mosquito repellent, particularly if you're fishing dusk and dawn, which is a very popular time to fish, particularly in the heat of the summer. Fish bite more early and late in the day, and that's when our mosquitoes are out and about more. And of course, sunscreen if you're fishing during the day. That's a no-brainer. Target the right fish, folks. That's our tip number 7. And if you're a beginner, anything that bites is the right fish. So you can get that feeling of the tug, which is why we fish, that tug on the end of the line. You can get that feeling. It's intoxicating. You'll want to do it more. You want to get those fish on so you can feel the tug. And then once you get good at landing fish, then you can start getting choosy about the species, about your meals, if you want to eat the fish, that kind of thing. So, and sunfish are more plentiful all summer long, late spring, all summer, and early fall. So that's really what I'd recommend going after. And these are some of the species of sunfish right here: bluegill, pumpkin seed, black crappie, otherwise known as calico bass. There are other ones too, like long-eared sunfish, redbreast sunfish, that can be a ball to catch. And then the bigger cousins, all in the same family here, largemouth and smallmouth bass. They can get very, very large. Largemouth bass can get 7, 8, 9, 10 pounds. 25, 30 inches long, and smallmouth can get, 4, 5, 6 pounds and up to 25 inches. But you can catch them when they're smaller too. When they're, 3 or 4 years old, they're 10, 12 inches. So they're a blast to catch, very active throughout the summer. So that's what you kind of want to target. Look for them in lakes and ponds. Rivers are great to fish in, but rivers are inherently a little more difficult to fish in because of the flowing water. Lines crossing, if you're fishing with people. Fish hold a little bit better to structure, but its structure is not as obvious in rivers and streams to people that are new to fishing. Where in lakes and ponds, you can see the lily pads, you can see the big trees hanging over, you can see the boulders, and the fish do move about a little bit more in lakes and ponds too. So if you're fishing in an area where there's not fish now, that fish might swim by in a little bit. And again, fish in the summer. What to do after the catch? So quick little safe handling, removing the hook, best practices for catch and release and catch and keep. Quick little external anatomy. We won't get into the internal anatomy. That's kind of gross to look at. I've been told, so I removed that slide. So little external anatomy, folks. Fish are not, they're very different than us, and they're very similar to us all at the same time. So they're vertebrate animals like us, but they're adapted to living in the water. And with that adaptation, they have certain things that are different, obviously. They do have the same 5 senses, so a good sense of sight, smell, taste, hearing, and touch. You want to kind of take advantage of that when you're thinking about fishing. So they don't have eyelids. They have eyes, usually laterally opposed on the sides of their heads. But they can see really well in the water column. But on a bright sunny day without eyelids, without way to close, they're going to be in structure, going to be in shade lines. So look for that structure, look for those shady areas. They can smell really well. They have nasal openings called nares on the top of their jaw. So if you're putting bait into the water, give it a little bit of time. It takes a while for that bait or food items, whatever you're using, to proliferate through the water column so they can smell it and come over. All fish have teeth. Some are very fine, like a nail file, like many of the warm water species. Some are very developed, very big, demonstrative teeth. Be careful there. Know your species. Don't stick your hands in a fish's mouth without knowing it. If sticking your hands in a fish's mouth, a great thing to do for certain species, believe me, to take the hook off. But for other species, it's not. So just know that. They all have fins. That's their means of locomotion, their arms and legs. Some species have spiny fins, like most of the warm water fish. Others have very soft rays, like the trout and the pike. They're cold and cool water fish. So they're not going to get you there, but this is a defense mechanism. They'll raise these right up if they're threatened, and they'll use them to defend themselves. This is the gill cover. All fish breathe through that mechanism called the gills. They breathe the same. They're looking at the same element that we are, which is oxygen. We take it out of the air. They take it out of the water. So this cover protects the gills. It's very sharp on a lot of fish, so just be aware of that. It can be razor sharp on certain species. And here is that kind of pinkish, reddish, fleshy object inside that is the gills. Never a good idea to stick your fingers up in the gills. because you can introduce disease and infection or cut them. If you see a hook down in the fish's mouth and it's in the gills and a telltale on that, you'll see a trickle of blood usually coming out from that operculum or gill cover. You're going to clip the line here, let that hook stay in. Hopefully you're using circle hooks, especially if you're catch and release fishing. The hook usually works its way out. But if you go in with that, you know, the needle nose pliers or the forceps, you're going to, try and do surgery, you're going to do more damage than good in that gill area. Fish is going to swim away, but likely suffer from delayed mortality. So just know that if you're keeping the fish, it doesn't matter, obviously. Fish all have a sixth sense called the lateral line. You can see it on this smallmouth bass right here. It's a way they pick up vibrations within the water column. It's thousands of microscopic pores that allow them to pick up those vibrations. I always give the analogy of the modern classics, Finding Nemo or Finding Dory, where you see that big school of fish all making those funky shapes. Well, they stay in schools. Those funky shapes are a little overdone, a little Hollywood there, but they do that by way of the lateral line. So it's not that much exaggerated. They can stay in wild shapes by way of that lateral line and keeping tight. Big predators like Bruce in that movie or other species like the smallmouth bass would use that lateral line to pick up vibrations from those school prey fish or smaller insects in the water or other fish swimming by. So very key resource for them and key sense that we don't possess. Handling fish. So the best way to do it, especially the sunfish species, is just like I'm showing you here. You're going to pass your hand from the head back and it lays all the fins flat. You can see I missed kind of the anal fin here. There's still a few spines, but my hand didn't go quite that far back. And it's kind of like an alligator. I guess the analogy they use with the alligator is it takes like less than a pound per square inch pressure to hold its jaws shut, just with 2 fingers. But to try and open its jaws or keep it from shutting on you, it's tremendously powerful. The alligator's jaws, the biting strength. But you just put your hand over it, and they don't have the muscle strength to raise it up. Similar to the fins here, they don't have the strength to raise it up with just a little pressure over it. So you just slide your hand over. They're going to be moving around really good. So when they first come out of the water, let them get their energy out. They'll swiggle around, then they'll calm down. Grab them from the head down. If they're big enough, like their bigger cousins, the calico bass, the largemouth, smallmouth bass that I just showed you, the larger members of this is a bluegill. You can literally put your thumb right in the mouth. They don't like it. You can just do it really quick. They'll calm down. Then you can remove the hook. They don't like the sensation, so they'll give you that quick shake. Then they'll calm down. Another way to calm fish down or flip them over. They get disoriented. They kind of calm down. So really, if you're catch and releasing fish, you'll want to handle them as little as possible. Take that picture really quick. Wet your hands so you remove less of that critical mucus coating that they cover their body with. Protects them from disease and infection. Allows them to move through the water better. And then take the hook off and get it in the water and show it over. After the catch, is it safe to eat the fish? Well, like all things in fishing, it's a yes and no answer, folks. I'm sorry. Really depends on the demographic you're in. And this is wild fish. This does not include our stock trout. We, again, raise our stock trout in a clean environment to mature size in a year to a year and a half. So these fish are a lot healthier to eat. They haven't been in the wild. They haven't been exposed to mercury. As mercury is what the advisory I'm going to talk about here. So if it's a wild fish that's been born and raised in that water, grew up in that water, and they're 4, 5, 6 years old, they have the ability to ingest or to take up through the food chain mercury. It's a process known as methylization. Mercury comes down in the precipitation. It gets into the food chain on the lower end, goes up through the food chain. The fish are eating higher up in the food chain. They can get some of that mercury locked into their flesh. And the older and bigger they get, the more of that they have. So if you're a pregnant woman, a nursing mother, a woman that wants to have children, or a child at the age of 12 and under, you should avoid eating those wild fish with the exception of our stock trout. And how do you know there are stock trout, right? I mean, most of the trout you're going to catch are going to be the stock trout. You would first find where you're going to fish, know that, say it's Lake Onoto, well, most of the trout in there have been stocked. A few of them will naturalize and live a year or two, but that's still a pretty young fish when we're talking about mercury. So, but when in doubt, don't eat them at that age and that demographic. And what all those have in common would be that they're young, developing, either the fetus or the young child is developing. You don't want mercury. The Department of Public Health is our sister agency that oversees all this. They have a fish advisories list. So if you want the final answer and the definitive on that, you would seek out the Department of Public Health. And again, they have a modern website where you can print off the fish advisory list. The statewide advisory for mercury is just that. It's an advisory, but there are other things like PCBs and other contaminants in certain water bodies that you want to be mindful of. They're also posted at the water body that you would go to. So just be mindful of that. If you're older like me, I do eat wild fish, but I'm gonna eat the ones that are just over legal size. I'm not gonna eat the ones that are 15 or 20 years old, the huge ones, because there's gonna be less chance of mercury in that flesh, the 3, 4, 5-year-old fish. So. And the last thing is just be responsible. Well, the second to last thing is be responsible and ethical while you're out there. Respect the outdoors. Always leave the area better than you found it. That's critical. If we care about it, we want it to be there for our children's children. Respect other people's privacy and space, right? So fishing is the original social distance activity. A lot of people do it. Their motivation, like me, is to get away from the craziness of life, de-stress, get out there by myself or with a couple of close friends or family. So don't come running up if you see us catching fish thinking that's the only place you can catch a fish. It's actually kind of rude, and you'll see a lot of people do that, though. It's funny. They weren't catching fish, and it's human instinct to just run right up next to someone else, side alongside them, and see if you can take see if you can take that opportunity. And if you're ethical, you might, after you've caught a few, just kind of back away and leave that site to someone else. Then always practice safe fishing. Watch out for the swinging hooks. Watch out for the dorsal spines, particularly on a lot of the spiny fish. Possess a valid fishing license if you're 15 years of age and older. Different states have different age requirements, but in Mass it's 15. No one understands the current fishing regulations. No excuse not to. Right on our website, you can print off the pages. You can get them where you buy a license if you don't buy the license on our website. A lot of our vendors will have them. Dick's Sporting Goods, Walmart, Bass Pro, a lot of the small mom and pop bait and tackle shops. Some town halls still sell licenses, but only a small handful. Release fish immediately if you don't intend to eat them or have them preserved by taxidermists. Don't release any unused bait fish. When you're done fishing, again, those you've probably collected those from a bait and tackle shop or from a different water body, and that's moving fish. So best thing to do is throw them up on the land and let the other wildlife have at them, or bring them back, keep them alive at home until you go out the next time. And it's not a bad idea to report lawbreakers. If you see someone breaking the law, don't confront them. Just, you might get their license plate number. You see them filling a bucket of fish and real small bass or trout. They're undersized. That may be undersized, or they're throwing trash out. It's not a bad idea to get a little information, call the environmental police. So if we don't all take care of it, it won't be there. And that's how you lose access to water bodies, is to just, make a mess of them, pollute it. And we see this a lot of times. And then the municipalities that might oversee that water body, the town or the state, might just take that right away from you. And it could be a drinking water supply that they allow fishing, and then it gets all messed up and they take it away. That little pond that I showed you was in Forest Park. That's been available and unavailable over the years. When it gets really bad and really littered up, the park in Springfield, the Parks Department says, I've had enough. We're going to shut this down to fishing. And then after a couple of years or a couple of months, they open it back up, and with all kinds of signs, and people are good for a while, then it gets all messed up again. So always think about that. And the worst kind of litter is fishing line. I always give this example because that's the other bad thing about monofilament line. It's plastic. It takes tens of thousands of years to break down in the environment. Exposed to the sun, it can take less, but it still take hundreds of years. So always take that out. If you see a ball of it like this, just take it out with you and throw it in the trash. This peregrine falcon, which is a species of special concern in Mass, there's not a lot of them. This poor chick died. The parent thought that the fishing line would be great nesting material, so it took it to weave as the nest. And of course, it is a great weaving material, but it doesn't take long for the chick to get all tangled up in it, and the poor thing died. And then this robin was having a great day, flying along the shoreline of Indian Lake in Worcester, and it accidentally hung itself on someone's discarded fishing line. So again, these species didn't die in vain, fortunately. I use them in all my education programs. So make sure you're not leaving trash, and in particular fishing line. And if you see some out there, don't be afraid to take it out with you. Obviously, don't touch certain trash, but fishing line, usually people just either forgetting it or deliberately just leaving it there for someone else to pick up. Last tip is to have fun while you're out there. Keep going, keep learning, find your passion in the outdoors, and don't ever stop enjoying it. So with that, we can open it up to questions, comments, concerns. Sorry, it went a little over 3. Should have warned you that that could happen. I get talking about this and I'm pretty passionate about it. So thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. And we do have a number of questions in the chat already.
Excellent.
First up from Diane, what are your favorite fishing locations? Do you have any?
Yes, I live out near Springfield, Massachusetts, and I would confess that the Swift River is right near me, which is a great fishing resource. Is the Quabbin Reservoir, which is Metropolitan Boston's drinking water supply, and they let us fish that for 6 months of the year. I actually have a boat that can fish it. And I've been kind of negligent. I haven't been out there as much as I should. Every time I go out there, and in some of the area ponds like Hardwick Pond, some of the ponds in the Berkshires, I like to fish. I'm more of a Western Mass person because I grew up out here. I always have a great time saying, I got to get back, got to get out there. So those in Massachusetts, those are some of my favorites. But I like some of the eastern ponds too. Brookline Reservoir, Jamaica Pond, we do a lot of programs. They're great fisheries. That big pond to the east of us, the Atlantic Ocean, don't overlook that. The ocean is a wonderful resource and a great fishery. It's just a little inherently harder to fish because you need to play the tides. You fish the incoming or outgoing tides, basically a moving tide, and that's when the bait is there, and that's when the larger species. So it can be a little more difficult. The gear is the same, it's just upsized. You just make the gear larger, make that push button or spinning rod or bait casting rod bigger to handle the bigger fish. So yeah, those are some of my favorites.
Awesome, thanks. Joshua asks, how long have you been fishing for?
Oh gosh, now you're showing now I gotta show my age. I started late. I started at 9 years old. That's actually a late bloomer for a lot of people to fish. We get people showing up at our events at 3, 4, 5, 6 years old with their parents or grandparents. So I started at 9 back in 1973. I was born in 64. So yeah, I'm 50, almost 57 now. So yeah, 9. And I still enjoy it. And it's kind of ironic that grew up fishing, was shown it by a friend of the family. My dad and mom didn't fish and decided to make a living doing it. So great life choice.
That's wonderful. Marina asks, what's the best way to euthanize fish you're planning on eating?
Oh, wow. Great question. And I almost hate to get to that because it's so graphic, but there's several ways. If you're fishing saltwater, typically what you'll see the first mate or even the captain of the boat do is the point of connection, but below the operculum near the gills, they'll make a slice there into the gills. The fish will bleed out really quick. You'll notice some people, you'll see YouTube videos of some people just throwing them in coolers or up on the shore. They will literally flap around for 15 or 20 minutes, suffocating slowly to death. And that's a horrible way to euthanize a fish. It will do the job, but it's not the right way to do it. So making that slice where you see the gill attachment and slice it deep so they bleed out, if you have that means, like in a cooler where you don't mind it getting dirty. But if you're like fishing the shoreline of a freshwater pond, I would always recommend taking a blunt object and smacking them between the eyes. Their brain is just down under. Don't forget their eyes are laterally opposed, so their brain is just down between their eyes, ½ inch to an inch in their skull. If you hit them hard there, it pretty much kills them. Like a chicken with its head cut off, pardon the graphic nature of that, they're going to move around quite a bit. That's nerves kind of just firing away still, but they're effectively dead. Their brain is kind of mashed. Or you can slice through there too and cut the brain stem in the brain. So those are kind of the methods. I would just recommend the blunt force. Take a blunt object. They even sell these tiny little, you'll see them in the fishing sections of stores or in bait and tackle shops. They look like mini baseball bats. Well, that's to do just that, is to euthanize the fish quickly. If you're going to make a meal of those fish, is it too much to ask that they die really quick and humanely? And to me, the answer is absolutely. They should. If they're making that sacrifice for you, you should kill them quickly. And any time I've ever done made that decision, that's what I do. I don't let them suffer. Thanks for that question.
All right, thank you. Is blunt force your preferred method?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Awesome, thanks. If anyone else has any more questions, please drop them into the chat. Otherwise, we're about to wrap up.
All right. And I would just add that we're going to probably send you some resources. This is going to be available to view if you have friends or family that you want to watch. And I'm jim.legacy@mass.gov. You can reach out to me with questions. You'll find me on the Angler Ed page of our website too. You can reach right out to me and ask questions. Always happy to help folks learn how to fish and get outside.